They say every neighborhood has that one person who treats the homeowners association like it's a sacred calling. The kind of person who doesn't just follow the rules but hunts for them. Someone who believes authority isn't given, it's taken loudly and often. In our neighborhood, that person was Calvin Briggs. Calvin walked the streets like he was on patrol. Clipboard tucked under one arm, phone always unlocked, camera ready at a second's notice. His eyes moved constantly, scanning for violations the way a hawk scans for prey. A trash bin left out a little too long. Grass growing uneven by half an inch. A car parked slightly crooked after dark. He wasn't elected. He wasn't appointed. He simply decided he was the law. And last week, Calvin Briggs made the biggest mistake of his life. He crossed my grandfather. Before we dive deeper, comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. It started at 5:30 in the morning, that strange hour when the world feels quiet but tense, like it's holding its breath. I was standing in the kitchen, still half asleep, pouring cereal when I heard the slow, unmistakable creak of the backyard fence. Grandpa was already awake, sitting on the porch in his old rocking chair, hands folded over a mug of black coffee. He stared out toward the yard with the calm focus of a man who'd learned long ago to recognize trouble before it announced itself. Without turning his head, he muttered, "There he goes again." I followed his gaze. Calvin Briggs was climbing our fence. Not knocking. Not calling out. Climbing. He swung one leg over, landed inside our yard, and immediately raised his phone. Click, click, click. He took pictures of Grandpa's vegetable garden like he'd discovered evidence of a crime. Tomatoes lined up neatly. Pepper plants standing tall. Wooden beds Grandpa had built himself with hands that had once rebuilt engines and repaired homes after storms. According to Calvin, the garden violated community visual standards. Think about that. A 75-year-old veteran growing his own vegetables was apparently a threat to neighborhood harmony. I felt anger surge through me and took a step toward the door, ready to confront him. Grandpa lifted one finger, calm and steady. "Patience," he said quietly. "A man like that doesn't stop when you yell. He stops when he traps himself." That was Grandpa's way. Measured. Controlled. He believed that fools didn't need enemies, just time. This wasn't Calvin's first trespass. Twice before, we'd caught him near the shed, poking around like he expected to find something illegal. Once, he even rattled the shed door and later claimed he was checking structural safety. Grandpa reported every incident to the HOA board. The response never changed. The HOA president, Marianne Holt, would smile politely and say, "Oh, Calvin is just passionate. He really cares about the neighborhood. Passionate people ask permission. Trespassers don't." The HOA hid behind vague language and internal enforcement rules. Grandpa listened, nodded, and said very little. Then he called the sheriff's office. They sympathized with him, but the answer was clear. Without solid proof and immediate action, it was his word against Calvin's. That's when Grandpa nodded slowly. "Well," he said, setting down his coffee, "then we'll make it clear." For the next 3 days, Grandpa worked in the garage. He hummed old songs, measured everything twice, triple-checked regulations, and followed every rule exactly. I handed him tools and watched him work with the quiet confidence of someone who'd planned far more complicated operations in his life. On the 4th day, the side gate looked exactly the same. But it wasn't. Inside the metal frame ran a low-voltage electric system, fully legal, inspected, and permitted. Grandpa even posted a bright yellow sign in plain view. Private property, electrified gate, no trespassing. Nothing hidden. Nothing illegal. Nothing deceptive. Calvin returned right on schedule. Just before sunrise, Grandpa sat on the porch sipping black coffee while I watched through the window, my heart pounding. Calvin scaled the fence again, muttering complaints under his breath, confidence dripping from every movement. The moment his hand touched the gate, snap. The jolt sent him yelping backward. He stumbled, lost his balance, landed hard in the dirt, and scrambled away like a startled animal. Grandpa didn't move. He took another slow sip of coffee and said, "That's accountability." By mid-morning, the street was buzzing. Calvin limped from driveway to driveway, telling anyone who would listen that Grandpa had installed illegal traps. But something had changed. People weren't buying it anymore. Too many neighbors had their own stories. Calvin measuring grass with a ruler. Photographing toys in children's yards. Peering over fences late in the evening under the excuse of inspection. By noon, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Grandpa and I attended. Marianne Holt sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck, wearing her familiar smile. Calvin sat beside her with his arm in a sling, milking every ounce of sympathy he could get. He pointed at Grandpa dramatically. "This man is endangering the entire neighborhood," Calvin said. "That gate nearly killed me." Grandpa calmly placed a folder on the table. "Permit. Inspection approval. Warning signage," he said evenly. "Everything is legal." Marianne tried to shift the conversation. "Legal or not, it's aggressive. It doesn't reflect community values." Grandpa leaned forward, his voice low and firm. "Community values don't include trespassing. He's done it repeatedly. I'm done being polite." The room went quiet. Then one neighbor spoke up. "He came into my backyard too." Another added, "He photographed my kids' bikes and reported them." The illusion cracked. Marianne banged the gavel, trying to regain control, but Grandpa stood. "You let someone act like an officer without authority," he said. "Now you're seeing the consequences." If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, hit like and subscribe, because it's about to escalate. Calvin didn't back off. He escalated. For 2 days straight, he circled our block in his pickup truck, slowing down in front of our driveway, staring at the gate like it had personally insulted him. Grandpa ignored him completely. On the third night, just after midnight, I heard rustling outside. Calvin stood at the gate holding bolt cutters. Grandpa was already waiting. From his rocking chair, he lifted a small remote and nodded toward the yard. "Watch carefully," he whispered. The cutters touched metal. "Zap." Calvin screamed, dropped the cutters, slipped in the mud and staggered backward. Grandpa recorded everything without even standing up. Panicking, Calvin pulled out his phone and called the police, screaming about attempted murder and illegal traps. Minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the street. The officers reviewed the footage in silence. One finally looked up and said calmly, "So you trespassed? With tools?" After warnings. There was no argument left. The cuffs clicked shut. Neighbors gathered, and this time they weren't whispering. They clapped openly. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, nodded once and said, "Some lessons need a little power behind them." Calvin sat in the back of the cruiser, reputation ruined, authority gone, HOA fantasy destroyed. Because when you mess with a man who's already survived real battles, you don't just lose. You expose yourself, and take your whole illusion down with you.